Good. Today's a very exciting day. We're going to be starting a new siman in our quest through Hilchah Shabbos and Kol HaTorah Kula, and we are going to be starting siman Reish Nun Aleph, the basic introduction to siman Reish Nun Aleph. It's going to discuss primarily the halachas of working Erev Shabbos. So the question obviously is, how do we define work? That is the obvious question. What is work? Is work that you get paid to do something, or is it a physical labor? Or is it something that takes your time, that involves effort that isn't related to the preparations of Shabbos? What is the definition of work? For example, if I get paid, I'm just making up an example. If I get paid to mow someone else's lawn, now, when is the last time I am able to do that? And is there a difference if I mow my own lawn? Right? Those types of examples we have to figure out. If you have someone who's an accountant, if he's making cheshbonos for himself, right? If he's making calculations for himself. So are you allowed to do that? Or other people, you're not allowed to do that. What exactly is the story? So we're going to start from the beginning of this sugya. This is going to be exciting. There's going to be a lot to chew on. We're going to start with the Torah, and then also we're going to learn about, are you allowed to learn Erev Shabbos? Why or why not? So let's start with the Torah in Siman Reish Nun Aleph. The Torah says, Ha'osim malacha be'erev Shabbos min ha-minchu lamala, dahainu mishe sha'os u'mechso umala, eino roya siman bracha la'olam. Someone who works on Erev Shabbos from the time in Mincha onwards, which the Torah defines as from 6.5 halachic hours into the day and onwards, so we'll call it 12:30. You will never see a sign of bracha from that forever. You'll never see a sign of blessing. So now, before everyone just leaves or checks out or whatever, we're going to see at the end of the day, do we hold like this? Why or why not? Number one. Number two is, how could we reconcile? We know many people do work very late till Shabbos. Is that a b'diavad type of situation that's not preferable? Or is that totally fine? What's the story over here? We have in the chat.
No. Also, too,
No, we did not.
if it's at if it's at that person's discretion too, most of the time it's not the person's discretion. They can't.
We're actually au contraire, mon frère. We're gonna discuss about discretions or not.
Like if they're self-employed,
something beforehand, do you need to specify, make sure that there's a stipulation with what time you're gonna end work or not? We're gonna discuss that. Very good. We're gonna discuss that also. That's right. That's right. That's right. That's why we're gonna have to do a deep dive to properly understand the halacha.
Well, the commute, does that count?
Commute, does the commute count? That's right. That's what we're gonna have to discuss all of it. Comes along the Torah in Siv Beis, nice shorty siman over here. Kosava Avi Ezri, Dafko ha'oisim alocha lehishtaker. This is specifically talking about that you're doing work to make profit, to make money from the work. However, you're allowed to fix your clothing and your vessels for the need of Shabbos and Yontif. That's clearly applied from over here. Two factors, which we're going to see, if I'm not mistaken, in the Beis Yosef. Number one, you have to get paid for what you do, and that's what we're talking about, working. Number two, it has to be that your work is not for the needs of Shabbos. However, if you're not getting paid and the work that you're doing is for the needs of Shabbos, that's permissible. With this, we could already shed light on one of the many questions that we asked before, which is, what is going on with the mowing of the lawn? Well, if you're mowing your own lawn, that's for the needs of Shabbos, for your needs of Shabbos, so that you have a nice lawn. That's permissible. It's implied from the end of the words of the Avia Ezri, Shafilu im eino oisa leshtaker, im eino oisa lesoidach Shabbos also. Oh, but it's implied from the end of his words that even if you're not doing it to make money, if you're not doing it for the needs of Shabbos, it's prohibited. Exactly what we just said. Right? So two things that you need. Number one, not making money from the activity that you're doing. Number two, it has to be, you're doing it for Shabbos, then it's permissible. So for example, if a person is a barber, okay, according to what we learned so far, not so simple to cut people's hair after 6.5 halachic hours into the day after 12:30. Oh, but if you're going to cut your own hair, then it's permissible. That will be fine. Okay, we're going to have to discuss if barbers are allowed to be open or not. We see what happens over here. We have to figure out why. Because of Adoni Ovi Haroshal V'chein Misha Koisev La'atzmo Svarim Derech Limudo Mutter Klayom. And then he says, my master, my father, the Rosh says that if you're writing Svarim in the way of learning, it's permissible the entire day. It's an interesting word, choice of words over here. You're writing Svarim for yourself. So if I'm writing Svarim and I have the intention to publish the Svarim, so now I can't. So it could be that also this has to do with if you're getting paid or not, editing Svarim and the like. So this is the Torah, okay? The first base, Yosef over here, the Bach goes into the technicalities of which mincha are we talking about. We know from the first Mishnah of the 10th parak of Psachim and Arvi Psachim over there, Sadi Tes, that we're talking about. We have Mincha Gedola, which is 6.5 halachic hours into the day. Then we have Mincha Ketana, which is going to be more 9. Samach Mincha, 9.5, 9 hours. So which mincha are we talking about exactly? I mean, the Torah already said you're not going to see a siman bracha. You won't see a sign of blessing after 6.5 halachic hours. We're going to come back to that. Let's take a look at the Beis Yosef. Here's when things get very interesting. The Beis Yosef at the end of the siman says, this is what we said before. Right, you need two things. Number one is that you're not getting paid to do the work, and number two is that you're doing the work in honor of Shabbos, and it's permissible. Mashmali the begod v'kelev lav dafka duhu adin lebigdei chaveru v'kelev shemut l'sakin l'sorach Shabbos kol shenonei doleizim sacha. However, it's implied that when we're talking about clothing, vessels, we're not. It's not specifically talking about yours. The same would apply if it's clothing or vessels that are your friends. That's permissible to fix for Shabbos as long as you're not getting paid. So the Beis Yosef over here is tweaking the mashma'os of the Torah. It was implied from the Torah when he quoted the Avi Ezri that this is specifically referring to if you are not getting paid and if it is for your own needs for Shabbos. The Beis Yosef is providing more of a leniency, which is if it is for your friend's needs for Shabbos, but you're not getting paid, that's also fair game and that's permissible. So it comes out, according to that, you're allowed to mow your friend's lawn if you're not getting paid. Right? But if you're getting paid, that's a different story. Okay, so we're going to come back to this more halacha l'maisa. We're just going through the Torah right now.
What if you tell him it's free, but I take tips?
So your tip is payment.
And then he doesn't have to tip you. You'll walk away.
If you know that it's not your first time mowing his lawn, and you know that he usually tips you, that's getting paid.
Let's say that guy doesn't tip. Sometimes like
so if he doesn't tip, so then it's fine because you're not getting paid.
It's variability. Sometimes the tips on zero.
So then you have to be careful with that, according to what we're learning.
Because he's saying if he tips you, it's
but don't worry, we're going to come back to Lachlam. I say how much you're actually allowed to work or not, or what's preferable or not. We're going to come back to it. Okay, not today. That's why you got to keep coming. Okay, says the next page. I said, Gam zeh sham. So the Rosh says, Kloimer she'afal pi she'einu l'soidach Shabbos sharim imnei shu davar mitzvah. Oh, it's implied over there from the Rosh that even if you don't need it for Shabbos, it's permissible. Why? Because it's a davar mitzvah. If you're doing something which is a mitzvah, it's permissible. For example, let's say you're writing a sefer Torah, tefillin, mezuzah. That's a mitzvah. So maybe you're allowed to do that because that's a mitzvah, as opposed to if a person's doing an accounting for a business, maybe that's not considered a mitzvah. I don't know.
They say that is considered a mitzvah.
It is considered a mitzvah, the same as writing a sefer Torah.
I'm saying it's the same, but we do consider it that you're saying if your own sake and your parnasa to sustain your family.
Yeah, okay, for sure. For sure it's a mitzvah to work. But is the actual work itself now going to be a mitzvah? If you're accounting for a business that isn't Jewish at all, is that the same as writing sefer Torah tefillin mezuzah?
100% now.
Okay, so we have to discuss that. We have to discuss that. So that's what it's saying over here. Even though it's not for Shabbos, if it's a mitzvah, it's fine. We have to categorize what we're dealing with. Umashma midevorov, and it's implied from the words of the Rosh. Oh, comes along the Beis Yosef, the Tashbeit's cotton over here. Wait a second. That's specifically if you're writing the sefer for yourself. But if you're writing it for someone else, not. A lot of times you have rabbis, they don't write down the svarim themselves. They give the shiurim. Other people are paid to write their svarim. Happens a lot. Let's talk about the sofer. He's writing sefer Torah tefillin mezuzah. Guess what? If you're getting paid, that could very well be a problem. That's what we're talking about over here. Comes along the kolbo. This is one of my favorite. Kolbo's great. I'm such a big fan of him. Kosav HaKolbo Simin Nun Ches Nira She'oser L'Sapar Misaper Yisrael be'arvi shabbosos v'yomim tovim min mincha l'mala. It's prohibited for a barber to give haircuts on Erev Shabbos and Erev Yontif. From min mincha l'mala, from when the time of mincha begins and above.
We're gonna assume he's supposed to
So we're-
stay minful.
Let's say we're talking about 6.5 halachic hours. So let me ask you, if
What do
you're
you,
a
what do you
barber
learn?
and you see Jews there, now you have to get up and say, "What are you doing? Get out! Close the door now! What are you?" You have to figure out what's going on over here. Nowadays, there are many barbers who are open. All the efshar lahatir to spoilers ma'isa hedyot lo gorim b'chol. You could permit a haircut which is a ma'isa hedyot, which anyone could do, because that's not worse than chol moed damrinon, where we say hedyot toifer kedarko adkan, where we say that just a hedyot could a regular act, he could sew according to his way if it's not fancy. So a simple haircut would be like my head. I don't got much hair. So it's easy. You just shave the thing, you do a two, the whole thing around, finished. I don't need the fancy things. Oh, but the fancy guy, he wants a 3 over there, he wants a 4 over there, and then over there he wants a 2, and then he's always switching it up, and he wants a little thing in the front, the bangs, whatever, right? I don't have that issue anymore. So he wants that. So that's already something else, the $100 haircuts. That's it's a big chachma involved with that, right? Damrina head your tovek kedarko akam va'olam nohagu heter bedavar v'kol makom shehalacha roifefes biadecha halach acher minhu. Says the Beis Yosef, the custom is that it's permissible, and in any place where the halacha is weak in your hand, go after the custom. So at the end of the day, he says the custom is that it's okay, but it seems like based on the Kolbo, he doesn't like it so much after 6.5 halachic hours. By the way, Rabbi Yeshua being Karcha is a machloikis in the Kamarim Psachim, in the between the Rashbam and Tosfos. If Yeshua being Karcha, who is this Karcha? It's funny because I just had a discussion with one of my chavrusas about it yesterday, and this is a discussion: is the Karcha? Is it someone who is it Rebbe Akiva or not? Gemara in Psachim, Kuf Yud Beis Amud Aleph. All right, that's the source of it. So if you look at the Tosfos over there, the Rashbam says Karcha is referring to Rebbe Akiva because Rebbe Akiva was bald. Tosfos says we don't nickname people that they're bald. That's not nice, especially a chash of Tana like Rebbe Akiva. Maybe they did it to hide from the Robins, whatever, hidden way. But you see, Rabbi Akiva was bald. Now, what this is saying over here is that you have to think twice about going to the barber after halachic midday. That's what we're saying over here, because a person could very well run into issues over here that we're dealing with, right? The Beis Yosef concludes the custom is that it's permissible. Let's just pull up on the screen over here the kolbo. Take a look at this inside.
But if you have a barber who you don't pay, and you're doing a covered Shabbos, according to our parameters, it shouldn't be a problem.
If you have a barber, yeah, correct. Veneer sha'aser saper misaper Yisrael barber shabbos yom mintoy minchol. You can't do it from mincha on. That's what the kolbo says. By the way, we're going to see they already spoil it. The Ramah is going to say you could do it. All right, you could do it the entire day. So in other words, it's clear from the kolbo, this end part of the Beis Yosef, that's not the kolbo. That's the Beis Yosef himself saying that the custom is to be lenient. It's just interesting. Point that out. Let's take a look. Let's go straight to the Darchei Moshe over here. That's all the Beis Yosefs. Kosev b'hagoysel fosi. Ubiyushalmi perakama detainis sha'oser la'oris isha be'erev Shabbos. Prohibited to get engaged to a woman on Erev Shabbos. V'chein l'divrei Torah. Nira shemamatim b'divrei Torah kadei sheyasasku b'sarchi Shabbos. Also, when it comes to learning, you should learn less in order that you should be involved with the preparations of Shabbos. We're going to be learning exactly what that means. What type of learning? How much less are we talking about? Does this apply in all cases? Let's say you have people who are preparing Shabbos for you anyways. Let's say you're a guest somewhere, you don't need to do anything. Let's say you're going to a hotel, etc. Ube'isser erusin eino hogin k'devarov elaminag pashut la'arus be'erev Shabbos. When it comes to the custom of when it comes to the prohibition, excuse me, of erusin, getting engaged, the custom is not like his words. Rather, we do in fact get engaged even on Erev Shabbos. Ube'or zerua kasav de'ena aser ela b'malacha kavua she'aser likvoya atzmoi b'malacha kedei lehishtaker mepnei she'sarach lasik b'sarchei Shabbos. The Or Zarua writes that it's only prohibited a set type of work. It's prohibited to do in a set manner in order to profit from, because you need it for the necessities of Shabbos. But if the work is temporary and it's not set, that's permissible. By the way, we discussed in the first paragraph was Mishnah Tezvav. What does it mean? Make your learning set. Multiple explanations. I think you missed that day. That was Friday. Yeah. Okay. This is the tour, the Beis Yosef, the Darchei Moshe. Any questions, comments before we resume to the Shulchan Aruch? No,
So the Ramah, Darchei Moshe is now giving a reason. The Torah didn't give a reason. It seems like
a reason
blanket
for
thing.
Reason for
Was a reason for not working after 6.5 hours after the day.
Yeah.
The Torah just gave a blanket statement, not basing it on anything.
Okay, that's a good point.
And the
Okay.
Ramah is now saying, obviously, but if your preparations for Shabbos are made, everything's okay. Seems like according to Ramah, you'd be allowed to work.
Right. So you see from this Darchei Moshe and Aleph, that's a good point, that we stop learning so that you could be involved with Shabbos. And we see over here, again in Beis, that he says you're not allowed to do set work. You need to be involved with the preparation of Shabbos. So the Ramah says it twice over, this point in the Darchei Moshe over here. And that is the main concern that we're dealing with. You have to be involved with the preparations of Shabbos. Yeah. That's an excellent point. Okay, comes along the Shulchan Aruch and says like this. Someone who does work on Erev Shabbos from Mincha time and onwards will not see the sign of bracha from his work. Yesh mefarshim mincha gedoyla. Yesh mefarshim mincha ketana. So we have a machloikis. Some explain this is referring to mincha gedola, 6.5 hours a day. Some say it's mincha ketana, which is later around 9.5, 9. So you see already, the Torah straight up, he was more stringent. The Beis Yosef over here, the Shulchan Aruch rather, Beis Yosef, same person, but Shulchan Aruch is saying, no, you should know, there's different opinions out there. It's not so simple. The Magen of Ram says, what does it mean you won't see a sign of bracha? That means in everything in your life you won't see bracha? No. Ma'oisa malacha. From that work itself that you did, you won't see a sign of bracha. Oh, the work that you did, you can still see bracha. That work that you did, though, Erev Shabbos after Mincha, you won't see bracha from that. Look at this Magen Avram. I want to leave it as a question. About pragmatia shari. You're allowed to do business the whole Erev Shabbos. Now, this question is why. So Magen Avram says it's implied from a Gemara in Pesachim Daf Nunam Beis with the story of the Bnei Baish. It's also mashma. It's implied from the Gemara in Shabbos. Ki Yashniya Lavatal Year. Chanusah. It's implied from the Gemara in Shabbos also.
It's a great point that we learned about this Tekiyas of Shabbos to stop people from doing malacha.
Question. Business also, you could get caught up with business. How could you come on to the leniency?
100%, but how, I mean, in the right, that was the thing that they did work and they would have build the Tekiyas, tell people to stop working, and that was like, and what is it, from Mincha Ketana, whatever it was.
Great, one problem. If you're doing business the whole day, how are you going to prepare for Shabbos?
Yeah, your wife is doing it at home.
Oh, it's if you have one. Who's doing it at home? Okay, if you don't, you're back to it. You're bacher. So, how could you have a head over here? What context is the Magen Avram talking about? All right, there's a very lengthy Machasish shekel who goes into this.
Can't you say takes a break?
Takes a break?
Takes a break.
Yeah, work. You ain't taking no break. Take a look at this length of this machas. It keeps going over here. So this is what to chew on over here. The dafka. Kisha oisim malacha derakeva, valim oisoiso deracharai, lefisho, veloy kavu ale ashari, v'chach mutu the gerish lamu kol kiyotz b'tzol. It's temporary work with permissible. Whatever the temporary work exactly means. I'll have to see. Comes along the what is this? This hay is on the next sif. Comes along over here. The Taz over here says from Rashi, it's Mincha Katana. The Taz concludes regarding the halacha, since there's no isser, Elo the tiyusa the ein basim and bracha. Not sure exactly what this word is, but it's not a full-fledged prohibition. It's just you won't see a blessing from your work. If you rely on Rashi, you won't lose that bracha, so to say. So according to the Taz, based on a shita of Rashi, you're allowed to work up until 9 halachic hours, 9.5 halachic hours into the day, which right now would manifest itself to probably, if I had to guess, around 4:30. We'll get you the exact timing right over here. So that already is a tremendous leniency that we didn't learn when we first started here a little bit before. We said that that is, in fact, not so simple. We thought from the tour today that it was from 6.5 halachic hours into the day. So if you look, Mincha Katana is later than I thought, 5:21.
Wow.
So you're allowed to work until 5:21, which, according to most jobs, would be okay. Because
you're on your way home already.
Well, we have to figure that out. Does the traveling get included in your work? Right? That was the question. Certain jobs, I know even for myself, when you have to travel more, it's expected already, and therefore you're going to get more because you have to travel. It's understood that it's taking more time. That's why you could get the same job in the city or a local area on Long Island. The city will pay 10 to 20% more because traveling in and everything. That's just a fact. Yeah.
The big like yesterday means curse, right?
It does?
I think it was like
curse. Layit is a curse.
Right.
Layit
from there.
No, but that's Layit is spelled Lamed Yud Yud Tes.
I don't think that's the same.
I'm not sure. So I'm saying I'm not sure. But could be. Sif Beis says L'sakim begod of the kill v'sorah Shabbos mutar kol hayom. You're allowed to prepare your clothing, all the vessels you need for Shabbos. That's permissible the entire day. Now it's impermissible. Should be doing that as we learned already. Siman Reish Nun, Reish Samach, Reish Nun Beis, a little Reish Samach Beis, all this Siman, and they're all grouped together, right? It's hard to remember exactly what's in which Siman, but V'hu adin big day chaveiro imu l'sorach Shabbos. They don't know to lev. Same thing. You could be involved with fixing your friend's clothing if it's not needed for Shabbos, and you're not getting paid for it. V'hu adin. The same exact. Okay, let's take a look at the Taz over here in Beis. Nearly imhu ani v'roitze lahoitzi haschar shyitu l'sorach Shabbos mutter. Afilu b'chol hamoed mutarim kol malachas alidei. Is a tremendous leniency. If you're poor doesn't mean that you have nothing and you live in a cardboard box. Poor means, in this context, you're living paycheck to paycheck, which is close to 40% of Americans, by the way. You can look up the stats on your own time, surprisingly. Doesn't matter if you're bringing in $300,000 a year, which after taxes is probably more like 220 in New York, but that's something else. You would know better than me. Or if you're making 30,000 a year. If you're living paycheck to paycheck, you're halachically considered poor regarding this specific halacha.
This guy's making a ton of money.
Doesn't matter. Guess what? If you're going to use the money that you're making because you don't have any other money in your wallet or bank account for Shabbos, guess what? Now you have a leniency. You can work more Erev Shabbos. Because on Chol HaMoed, you're allowed to work in that case also. That's a big leniency. If you need the money.
He signs stuff up for Nisser and that allows it.
We don't need to go into Is it his fault that he's poor?
It's his fault.
Is it his wife's fault? Is it the spending habits? Does he need a new job? We don't care. At the end of the day, he has no money.
Right.
The money that he's going to be using is going to be used for Shabbos. Now he can tap into the leniency. Look, if you don't like the leniency, you could tell anyone you want not to go like the Taz and be stringent. But the Taz himself offers the leniency. I'm going to go with the leniency. All right. If it would apply to him. Comes along and says so that's a Taz. Yeah? Fine. Now, comes along by the way, you should watch the shir I gave on get out of debt. Yeah. I'm saying, okay. Comes along the Shulchan Aruch and says, the same thing if you're writing Sfarim for yourself when you're learning. But you can't write while getting paid for someone else. You're allowed to get a haircut the entire day. Afilu misapad, even if the barber is, a lot of times you have Russians and Sfardis, Yisrael, who are cutting the hair. You have to go back to more. Should decrease your learning a little bit on Erev Shabbos in order that you can prepare for the needs of Shabbos. Comes along the Magen Avram and says, why are you allowed to get a haircut? You know why you're allowed to get a haircut Erev Shabbos, says the Magen Avram? Your haircut is for Shabbos. So therefore it's permissible, even if you're going to get paid. Oh, yes, the Magen Avram Avagad became Magab also little scar feel Sar Shabbos. I need to support it, and you can call the Kol Shul Sar Shabbos about better Pesach also feel fine. The reason why over here is that when you're fixing someone else's clothing, and obviously doing it for Shabbos. When you're getting a haircut, it's obvious that you're doing it for Shabbos, therefore it's permissible. And then he adds in, it's discussed in Siman Tov Samach Ches. Keep in mind for Pesach next year, you're not allowed to get a haircut over Pesach. That's a whole discussion in itself, obviously.
This year we were.
Go ahead.
This year we didn't have that.
Okay. The Kavanas Kosov says in the Arizal over here. Sharizal hayanizar shulagalecha mincha filu Erev Shabbos. The Arizal was careful not to get the haircut after mincha, even Erev Shabbos. I want to add, we just put up the Gemara in Tainus Shir, and if I'm not mistaken, it was on Yud Ches Amud Aleph, the end of the second Perek, about make the Yud Zayin maybe Yud Zayin, yeah, about how often people should get a haircut, and we discussed that. When we learned what was the Siman Reish Samach Beis, I think, right?
Like getting a haircut?
Or Reish Samach.
We said it was
one of those Simanim.
It's all subjective how fast that people's hair grow.
Yeah. The Gemara talks about though subjective also on what type of person you are. The Gemara says a king gets a haircut every single day. Kohen Gadol every Erev Shabbos. Kohen Hedjut, regular Kohen, once every 30 days. So you see, based on how often you got to get haircuts, which is interesting. Shave, touch it up, trim it, like the lawn. The lawns on baseball fields. They trim that thing once a day. Yeah, they cut that once a day, and they have a special type of lawnmower that could cut it there. If you look into it, if you're interested, you're probably not, but it's a special. It's like a $2,000 lawnmower. It's not the regular $300 one that you get. They probably even have more than the $2,000. It's a special one. You could get it for your yard too if you like it that short. Make a golf course over there, and yeah. You put it. You just dig a little hole, mini golf, and then you don't need to spend thousands of dollars. That's it. Finished. Okay. Now comes along what is this? This Machasid. Yeah, Machasid and Shekel points out that Cholamoid also a haircut's problem. It's going to be more stringent than Erev Pesach. Okay. Comes along the last. Are we over here? Yeah. Comes along the last Magen Avram. What about learning Torah? V'chein ein koivin yeshiva bikust Natina be'erev Shabbos. That's why we don't establish yeshiva in this place. It seems like in Erev Shabbos. Ubeseder hayom. That's going to go. Ubeseder hayom kasav imragil limo davar sheish lakitzva. That's what we do. Oshaloi medin rabim ayvatlana. If you learn a set amount, or you learn with other people, don't stop that learning. I think we don't necessarily do a set amount, but we do a set amount of time that we dedicate to learning. So it could very well be that that's what a set amount means also. Be the same logic. So you could continue learning. But when you learn in yeshiva, that's called something where there's no amount. Because you can get caught up with that, and that could take away from your preparations of Erev Shabbos. Shiragilin lefalpel. There's a lot of pilpul over there. Back and forth conversations, it could get dragged out. Imlo, Peter Shashel, let's say the Shari, unless you're just sitting in the yeshiva, but you're just learning Rashi. So if you're just learning Rashi, that's already permissible. Because you're not going to get caught up with that. If you're saying couple kapitel tehillim, that's fine. In the yimsa acher kach liknois azi lo yikfa halima b'boiker. This is really going back to Reish Nun, which we already learned. If by you learning now, the stores will get closed after, don't start learning then. It's amazing how early. I think at least the restaurants have to close by 3 o'clock here. When Shabbos starts at like 8 o'clock. It's just, I don't know why they. Supermarkets, what time do they close?
2.5 hours beforehand.
2.5 before officially.
2 officially, but then they stay a little. I think
they do. Okay, so they.
People shooting. I was there in close a few weeks ago, and like at the close time, you see people coming in.
Yeah. Okay. So that's already fair. The supermarkets are more open. So you have to know if you're going to sit and learn until 6:30. Guess what? That's gonna be a problem. So you have to buy before. It's a good idea always just get those errands out of the way so you can learn with more of a yishuv hadas.
I'm guessing if you learn where you're going to daven minutes, that shouldn't be a problem. Even pilpul, right? You're going to start davening when you're
100%. That's fine because you're going to be reminded. That's what they bring down over there. It says in the Mishnah in Avos, lo kol hamarba b'schoira machkim, something like that. That anyone who increases himself with a lot of business won't become wise with Torah knowledge. So we discussed on that Mishnah a lot of different explanations in the second parak. One of them was someone who's working and he devotes all of his mind to working, and he's involved with a job which requires a business which requires a tremendous amount of focus. Even when he's not working, he's going to be thinking about it. So it's going to take away from his focus on the Torah that he's doing. Someone once told me, he said, once I started working full time, it was so hard for me. Even when I sat in the basement to start learning, I said, you got to block it out. It's part of the Yitzhahara. But that's the over here. If you have other errands to do, just get them off your mind. You'll learn better. That's my minhag at least. If you're not going to find anything after Yadavin, you're allowed to even purchase it before Shachris, as we learned in Siman Reish Nun, because it's Archi Shamayim. Shazem mitzvah iveres v'gami medaretz. It's a passing mitzvah, and it's also from the Torah. Ubilva shikr kriyash makodem. Okay, it's all discussion. Do you need to say Shema or not beforehand? If the congregation's davening, don't separate from them. However, if you prepared it on Thursday, you're allowed to learn according to how you regularly do. This you have to be cautious with because really the preparations are supposed to be Erev Shabbos. We're going to see, if I'm not mistaken, people are going to discuss this, that don't just do all your preparations on Thursday. You're really supposed to be doing them on Friday. So do them at the right time on actual Erev Shabbos. Do it and then go back to the learning. Yeah.
So just going back to over here. So we're saying that the buying, I don't remember this. So we're saying that the actual buying for Shabbos is a daraisa din.
That was a whole discussion. There's a long Be'alacha and Reish Nun. If it was daraisa, if it was a smachta, but it definitely has a strong basis. Yes. Okay, it's a good point. You brought that up. Good point. Okay, Amir Hashem. Tomorrow we will continue. This is basic summary of the Torah Shulchan Aruch, based on what I thought were the main points that come out halacha l'maisa. Okay, everyone should have
that's very good.
Okay, good. Shkoyach David, thanks for your approval.
All right, very good. Have a good day.
Spoke to your friend yesterday.